There you go. Thanks, Graham. And our goal is to be finished by, I think it is 10:15. If anybody has to leave before that, please just go right ahead. And we try to stick to our time as people have other things they need to move on to. But let's just begin with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for your presence in our lives. Lord, your presence around us that talks to us, that guides us, that allows us to move forward in the work that you are doing, Lord, that we get to participate in that. And I thank you for these my YWAM friends, Father, who seek your face each day and seek to be obedient to what you've called. And so we just give you this time of connection, and thank you that we can connect even in this way. Amen. Okay, so I think I'm going to pass it over to Paul, and he is going to introduce Donna and conversation with her, and that's where we'll start. Paul.
Great, thank you, John. It's really fun. I was thinking about Peter and Donna in preparation for this interview, and I met Peter, came through Thunder Bay, Ontario back in the late 70s with Uli, and they recruited Hank and Pirko Polke into YWAM at the time, and we followed a few years later. Anyway, that was my first introduction to Peter. That's back then, and I thought, starting out, I don't know how many people, Donna, know your history, but you and Peter went into YWAM as a professional, Peter was a professional pilot, and you went in there at a certain point in time. It was back in the early days of Kona. Just thought maybe tell us a little bit about your entry point into YWAM and maybe something what you learned or what you took away from your Kona experience.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you. And just briefly, Peter, he was a jet pilot, air traffic controller, and then went into business and was a businessman in Montreal, doing very, very well. And these YWAM leaders came in to get ready for the Olympic outreach. And they asked Keith Price, who was a man of peace in the city, who could we have on our board? And they said, well, why don't you ask Peter Jordan? He's a businessman and he's an elder at the church, etc. So they asked Peter, and he said, sure, you can use my office and secretaries, whatever you need. And they said, but we'll also be having prayer times. And could you bring your wife? Well, guys, I did not enjoy prayer times. They were boring. I was raised in a church that prayed long prayers and realized that if our hearts aren't right, God's not even listening. But these guys, when they prayed, they asked God questions. I had never seen that in my life. And, I was raised in a church strong on the word. I got saved every year to make sure I was at summer camps. And then when I met these guys and they were asking, 1,800 will be coming to the Olympics. And I said, what? They said, yeah. And then they asked him more questions. And that made me hungry. And then I went to a barbecue. I was a very proud woman. And I liked nice things. We lived in a big home, 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. And this man came in, David Barker. Some of you may know him. He walked in and he had longish hair and crossed eyes. And I'm from a home that was very creative. And his tie did not match his shirt. His tie did not match his socks. His tie was a terrible color. I mean, they're polka dots or something. That's the first thing I see. But then he opened his mouth and he said God sent him from Toronto to Montreal and that he'd find 4 or 5 people hungry for God. And I knew I was one. He said, if you stay after the barbecue, I'll pray for you. So I stayed after the barbecue and I made Jesus Lord of my life. Now, the last thing Peter wanted, and my life changed when Jesus became Lord. Peter was born in China of missionary parents, in a prison for 3.5 years. And the last thing he wanted to do was be a missionary. So I tried to be the Holy Spirit in his life, and that doesn't work. And he 2 years later, in a boys' brigade meeting, the guy next to him fell asleep, but the Holy Spirit got Peter. And he said, okay, I'll do whatever you ask. And we went on the outreach, and God spoke clearly. I want you to leave everything, take your 4 children, and go to Hawaii with the Cunninghams and Paul Hawkins and some of these guys. So within 5 weeks, my friends, we were on our way. I did not have my father's blessing. He said, I'll pray for you, but can't bless you. We had this big home. It was not rented yet. And the Lord said to rent it, not sell it at this time. And went to immigration, and they said, where are you going to get your money? And it's very hard to explain to immigration that you're going to trust God. So they gave us a 30-day visa. We had no support. We had a blessing from our elders, but my family, friends, everybody said, you are absolutely crazy. So here we go to Kona with 4 little children, and not easy, with boxes packed with our clothes and blankets and things. We arrive in Kona, Darlene Cunningham meets us, and they put us in the Hukilau Hotel, which is now the Mercy Ships. They just got it last week. It's the Mercy Ships base. After all these years, 46 years, they now have a Mercy Ships base, and right where we started. And then 2 days later, she came to us and she said, we've been praying that you wouldn't come unless you knew that God called you, because we have never had a family like this in the mission, and we have no housing. So she said, we were going to put you up in a tent up the mountain, and there'll be other tents next to you. And so that's where we started out. And I remember, some of you have heard our story, but I remember the kids coming to me and saying, Mom, can we have ice cream? And I said, I don't know. We've never lived this way. And you'll have to ask your Heavenly Father, because we're being reparented by him. And so they asked God for ice cream. And the next day they got a letter in the mail with $1 in it for each of them, saying this is for ice cream. And that's how we've lived ever since. So then we started, they didn't have DTSs in those days, but Lauren and others led the school. And then they asked Peter if he'd be on the staff of the first DTS up at King's Mansion. And so that's where we started, and went from there to Peter becoming Lauren's assistant. And then in 1987, we led many schools in Kona. Counseling, I was involved with counseling ministry, whatever, schools of evangelism, DTSs. And that's when we built our relationships with the Pacific Islanders. And Paul mentioned this. And what happened there was that the Island Breeze team came from Samoa, and they were going to put them outside the base because there was no room. And I said, no, you don't do that. When Islanders come, you bring them to your home. So Peter and I moved out of our room. We lived in a room, 2 rooms, 6 of us for all those years. And we told the Islanders they could use our room. And that built relationship. So when you lend them your room, you lend them your fridge, and they use your fridge. So they couldn't believe that we would give them our room. And that's where the girls all stayed. And that's when we started to build relationships with the Pacific Islanders. And that's continued because of that, us opening our room and our fridge, and they became family to us. And a few of them are still Yeru and Alauni, and some of these are really family. Okay, so we were going on. You want me to mention about associates now, Paul?
Oh yeah, that sounds good, Donna.
Okay, so you correct me or whatever. We were there until 1987. We had a burden for those who've been in the mission. Just how are they doing? So we felt we were to take July and August to come up to Washington and then up into Canada. And Uli Korch, he lent us his multicolored yellow propane. Do you remember that van?
Yes.
To do a journey. And so we went up into Vernon and met with a couple that had been in our DTS, Carolyn Coleridge and her husband. And we had met them in Kona, and we started talking and sharing. And they said, why don't we have a barbecue and invite others to come that are in Vernon? So we said, sure, we'll come back, in I don't know if it was a week or two, we'll come back and let's meet together. Well, 60 turned up for that barbecue of people who'd been in the mission. Some of them were in the same church, same neighborhood, but they didn't know. And as soon as they came together, it was like what the Lord showed us. When you're in YWAM, like you're a bunch of hot coals, but when you separate, you start to lose your fire. And many were discouraged. Some lost faith. And so we just came together and prayed together, and realizing that when you bring the people together who've been in the mission, it just starts a fire again. And that's when we started, I won't go into it, but camps and gatherings. So the Lord started to show us that we needed to leave Kona. And if you can imagine, Peter was Lauren's assistant at this time. And Peter never looked for position. He was there to make Lauren look good. And not that Lauren didn't look good without Peter, but he made sure that any gap or any hole was filled. And so Lauren would have, people that would come onto the base, he'd have them take care of them. And you'd love this story. Graham and Trina Kerr. Okay, when I was a young bride.
Remind everybody who Graham Kerr is, because not everybody may know.
Oh, most of these old people do, Paul. Come on.
Yeah, but it's not all old people online.
I know. Graham and Trina Kerr, he was the Galloping Gourmet on TV. And he was the top cooking guy in those days. And I used to love watching him when I was a young bride, and be ironing and watching Graham. And, he'd jump over the chair with his glass of wine. And he was very English, crazy guy. And then when he made the meal, he'd say, is there anybody out there that'd like to have a meal with me? And I'd put my hand up and I'd say, yeah, as I'm ironing, I really want to have a meal with you, Graham Kerr. Anyway, that was before YWAM. So I come into YWAM, and because of Peter being Lauren's assistant, Lauren said, and Graham and Trina came to see Lauren because they got into a movement, a discipleship movement, that women weren't allowed to speak. How are we doing?
We're getting some feedback from somewhere. I think you're back on now.
Okay.
Donna.
So anyway, in those days, like Peter would take care of the people, Lauren's visitors, or answer questions, etc. So Lauren says to Peter, could you please have Graham and Trina for lunch? You guys, all I have in my fridge is peanut butter and bread, and I'm having the Galloping Gourmet for lunch. So they come for lunch, and all I have is bread and peanut butter. But what they loved was the hospitality. And that's when I learned that it's all about hospitality, not entertainment. And I can honestly say that Carol and Uli Korch taught us that, because when we were in British Columbia, they would have us over for a bowl of soup and just talk to us and listen to us. And Graham and Trina became two of our best friends. Anyway, so we returned back after being in British Columbia. We had just gotten our green card, okay? It took all these years to get a green card. Had to go to court. We were going to be deported to China, et cetera, et cetera. And we go back to see Lauren and Dar. And we've got to tell them now that we feel God has called us to Canada to start YWAM Associates. And it was really hard because Peter was committed to Lauren. But Lauren said, God's already told me this, that you would be leaving, and we want to bless you. And then we shared the ministry with them. And they said the council, the YWAM Council in Kona, blessed us. And then Lauren thought, well, why don't you do it in LA? You just got your green card. And we said, well, the Lord's called us to Canada, the west coast of Canada. Now, the east coast of Canada, where I'm from, one of the elders said to me, if you don't come back and be a pastor of our church, we will no longer support you. We can't support you if you're going to go back to Canada and not come be a pastor. And I cried. And I said, we've got to do what God is saying. But he repented after. and said, you do have to do what the Lord said. So anyway, we came back to Canada in 1988. After we led our largest school of 105 students, we came to British Columbia and started the ministry for YWAM Associates.
Yes, and I remember when you first came in, you weren't in Richmond, but later you set up the House of Peace in Richmond.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the start. Now, tell us a little bit about Associates, because it's all over the place now. It's really a network of ministries. Not so much you're not leading the whole thing, but tell us how it's working as an international YWAM ministry.
Okay, right now, since Peter went home to be with Jesus, like he used to write e-touch, and we were in touch with thousands of people, literally. Just so you know, there's about 4 to 5 million associates. Now that's including alumni and the parents and the pastors who have been so good, and those who've given to the mission and have a heart for mission. But our hearts really are for the alumni too, but not excluding them. So we have facilitators in different nations, and we have 14 facilitators now in different nations, so that when students go by, they have someone that they can talk to. The reentry book, George Verwer uses it more than YWAM, and he thinks it's the best, and he uses it for all his people leaving. George Verwer was over Operation Mobilization, but I think people are starting to use it after all these years, more and more, because there has to be, when you go back home and you don't have a local church that understands you, or you don't have a group of others to walk with, you lose your faith. I hate to say that, but we need this more and more. And especially we're seeing this in COVID. But people who've been in YWAM, there's just something, your family as soon as you meet, even though you don't know each other. So honestly, somebody just phoned me this morning, and he is so excited about associates, and he is in the sports field and the media, and he interviews key sports guys. And he just said, Donna, I want to be with you. I see the need. I see the need. And it's not organized. We just want to keep the values of the mission. That's the only thing we have. Please keep the values of the mission, because they are kingdom values, and they're not just YWAM values, they're kingdom values. So please keep those. And our hearts are to be a family as associates, and our hearts are to encourage the alumni to take the kingdom into the spheres that they're involved in. They are not, they're still part of the YWAM family, but take the kingdom, what you've learned in the mission. This is why it's so important what we're teaching in the mission in DTS, that they get the values, the kingdom values, and then take the kingdom values into the spheres. So I know we have a long ways to go. And, but I believe even this guy that phoned me this morning, so involved in media and sports, he said, this is it. This is it. We've got to help others take the kingdom. And I think if you're involved, I'm still involved a lot with young people, how important this is, because there's so much deception. But if we have each other, if we have fellowship with one another and bring people together, I think we can encourage one another and strengthen one another to finish the race well. Is that good, Paul?
That's good. Circle back a little bit to those early days in Richmond when you came back to Canada.
Yep.
I remember Vi and your Vi Ellie and your daughter Julie showed up on an outreach. This was before they were married. They did some things in Christian schools in Richmond and all over, but part of that was a word of the Lord that came to us back in Cambridge, that we should invite islanders to Canada to work with First Nations. And so they came in, and there's been, over the years, there have been several types of ministry: Island Breeze, Second Wave, Pacific Wave, all sorts of ministries like that. And
Yeah.
what's some of the current things that are happening with islanders? Because you still stay in touch with them all over the world. And what's happening with the island missions and their impact in YWAM and also their impact in their nation and maybe in other parts of the world?
Yep. Okay, Vi is more in touch with the Fijian, not just YWAM, but the Fijian leaders. In Samoa, Alauni is over associates. Now, she's one of the girls that we adopted way back when she was 18 and then hadn't seen her for years. And she contacted me and said, Mom, I'm going back to Samoa and I've got a heart for the associates, what you and Dad are doing. And her husband had died. And she's amazing, just rising up. So she's working with the YWAM base as well as the associates ministry. And so she's keeping in touch with a lot of the, it's very interesting because the base leaders there used to be in Taiwan. So they're completely bilingual in Chinese. And the Chinese are coming into Samoa. And some of the associates or alumni can speak Chinese. So they're discipling the government leaders. I mean, you could go on how this is spreading. And now they're in touch with the different islanders. Like there's so many from the island of Savai'i. They're some of the best missionaries. Silo in Bangladesh and his two sons, Caleb. And I've walked with all these guys. Some of the islanders are the best missionaries, especially from the outer islands of Savai'i, where Vi is from. And then there's one here, Tavita, Davidson, and others. Yeah, so yeah, Uso, my son-in-law, he's involved in construction. So is Davidson, Tavita, and they're doing amazing. And they bring such joy to the community. But some of the islanders have been taken in by our gods. And that's the heartbreaking thing, which is materialism, women, alcohol, and if they get taken in by them, it's very difficult. But we're believing for them to come back. I've wept much, and I've done the harimai, calling them back, and believing that they will, the ones that have gone away will come back. But the other guys are doing well.
I was just this past winter, I was with a group of Fijians that all have been in YWAM, and they're all still interested in missions. Paul Lomavatu was leading that, and Asa from up north.
Yeah.
So there's some underground movement there happening, and it's still around the issue of missions.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
those guys used to sit around our table, Paul and Bear and those guys.
Yeah.
In BC. Now,
Well, I think the first team of islanders, we asked over for a cup of tea, and they came over for a cup of tea expecting supper, but we just served them tea. And that was our first introduction to a cultural faux pas. So
yeah, and we're heartbroken over Rusila, because Rusila was like a daughter too, with her going home so early and leaving her two children, because she was there in the house with these
right.
guys. Yeah.
There's lots of connection. Now, part of that connection too is something that's interesting, particularly for you, Donna, because you and Peter connected so well with Watchmen.
Mhm.
And I'm sure a lot of you that are listening know David Damien, because he's spoken in YWAM in various locations. But actually, Watchmen for the Nation in Canada, Peter and Donna were part of that and are still part of that. Kind of give us an update on what's happening across the nation with Watchmen.
Okay, I'll tell you where it started. It was when we moved to British Columbia. I felt the Lord tell me to go to a pastor's conference in Bellingham. I don't know why I'd go to a pastor's conference, but I went. And I went by myself, and I saw that he says young guy standing at the back, and he looked like an islander. So I went back and I said, "Hi, I'm Donna. Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Egypt. My name's Mawson." I said, "Oh, I thought you were an islander." He said, "No." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm carrying Pastor Bob's suitcases and learning from him." And that was David Damien. who had been a heart surgeon in Egypt, top heart surgeon, written books. God called him to Canada and told him to lay down everything and walk with Pastor Bob Birch, who was an intercessor. And so they phoned Peter and I and asked us if we'd meet with them, Gideon Chu, Pastor Bob, John White, some of these guys, and seek the Lord of what God was saying about Canada. And the Lord said that the eagles would be coming to Whistler Mountain, and that and they would be they'd be seers of what's going on. So my friends, right after that, over 2,000 bald eagles landed on Whistler Mountain. You could not get airplanes in right below. And then that July, around 2,000 people arrived from the nations, and there was no advertising. God woke people up and said, go to Whistler Mountain. And that's where it started, when we were being led by the Spirit and started to make things right with our First Nations. But the Maori leaders came, the Aboriginal leaders came. They came from all over. It was the Garretts came, the worship leaders came. It was, but we had to really learn, it's not about our agenda. It's about what does God want? And that is really hard to break through. But I think we've got it. Like, people used to come with their cards and their books and everything. And we said, I'm sorry, but that's not what it's about. It's about being in the presence of God and pleasing him. So that was the beginning, Paul. And then we realized that we needed to make things right with the French. So we started to walk with the French. And then we had to make things right with the Jews. And we found 38 of the survivors of the St. Louis ship and brought them to Ottawa, asked their forgiveness. That was an unbelievable time. I'll never forget that, because I was walking with David, so was Peter, and said, ask their forgiveness for what we'd done. And they said, we forgive you, but we can't forget. We said, we don't expect you to. And we really did bless them. And I don't have time right now, but with the Jews and then with the First Nations, we've walked with them. I guess I can tell you this. I'm saying this in humility, but just recently, Faytine asked Kenny Blacksmith and I if we would pray a blessing across Canada, me as a mother in Canada, and he as a First Nations father. And I'm just so blessed by Kenny and the humility he's walking in. So that's where we're at now. It's going into Egypt and Israel. The sons of Ishmael and the sons of Isaac are making things right with each other like never before, which is affecting the Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and many are alumni, guys. And it's because we're listening to God as watchmen. The alumni want to be part of that, because that's who we are. We are people who listen to God, who have faith to believe and walk in obedience. And we believe in the power of intercession. And so that's just another stream that God has raised up across this nation and now reaching the nations.
Oh, that's so good, Donna. We're getting, you're just getting an overview here of some interesting things. I'm sure this is worth a coffee or a tea with Donna somewhere and get some more insights. Maybe one last thing before we pass this over to Russ and Sandy. Just kind of in reflecting right now where you're at in the mission. Peter's gone home to be with the Lord. Your daughter Lori has died. Your son Peter has died. You're kind of in that last phase of life, and I'm right with you. I'm encouraging you in this, but you know, it's a time of legacy, and you certainly have a wealth of legacy, but you also have vision for the future and vision for what's happening in YWAM. So just what's happening right now in YWAM that you feel is worth celebrating about?
Oh, wow. I think we're coming into alignment with the kingdom. I think intercession is being restored. I really do. In fact, I just had a card from Joy Dawson yesterday, and she's 96, and she wrote to me. And she's, you know, just to see intercession restored back to the mission, listening to God, being led by the Spirit. You can get teaching anywhere, but we need to learn how to be led by the Spirit and include his presence. The University of the Nations is continuing on. There's so much in that. Yeah, I think what I'm sensing in my spirit is the mothers and fathers are very needed, Paul, and the grandmothers and grandfathers. It's one of the greatest needs. Yes, there are hundreds of youth being sent out, but the mothers and fathers are so needed. In fact, I'll tell you this is heartbreaking for me. I don't know if some of you know, but this city went through a very, very hard time with YWAM. And the leader came to me yesterday, beautiful young woman, 24 years of age, and they started having a Jesus conference for 3 days. And I just said to her, I'm sorry that I didn't come to you when you're going through such hard time. I'm supposed to be an elder in the mission, and I didn't come to you. And she cried. She said, nobody's ever said to us that they're sorry. And I said, I will come to your conference and I will publicly ask forgiveness in front of the pastors and the leaders that I didn't take my place as a mother in the city because they were orphaned when the leader embezzled all the money. And I will come and ask forgiveness. And I believe that that's going to bring healing. So if the mothers and fathers can take their place and the grandmothers and grandfathers, it's so needed. Yeah, this is the card that we have. And I'm encouraging Patricia to go to the meeting. So it's We Are Family, YWAM Associates International. And it's to help create smooth, effective, and sustainable transition from YWAM back to your home, church, business, or sphere. So let's believe together that this 3 to 4 million or people will get restored back and will be effective and take the kingdom into their spheres. We need you. I mean, I believe we're to be walking together.
All right, Donna, thank you. I'm going to pray for you and we'll bless you, but your request is part of that prayer. Lord, you heard what Donna's impassioned plea for intercession, for the nations, for restoration, for taking her place and us taking our place in our spheres of influence. We pray a blessing upon you, Donna, that the Lord's grace would continue to multiply to you, through you, and around you, and the Lord would continue to lead you and be an inspiration and a blessing to the rest of us. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your heart today.
Thank
Amen.
you, Paul. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you,
Donna.
Donna.
You, John.
Yes, I just I'm thinking that there's as we get to Russ and Sandy in just a second here, somebody else who has something for Donna. There's somebody else who feels they have a prayer or a word or just a statement they want to make regarding Donna. Just go ahead.
Hi, Donna.
Hey, well, bye.
Yeah, I wanted just to really, I think I can speak for many of us Pacific Islanders all over in mission. I want to tell you how much you mean so much to many of us. And I want to honor you. Speaking this word, I just wanted to speak those words over you. The way you nature us Pacific Islanders, when left home, we sort of look at you as a mother to many of us. You spoke early when we come to your place. There was a sense of welcome. We took advantage of everything at your home, even your fridge in Richmond. I remember those days. You were committed to us. You make us feel so at home every time. I remember Vi used to talk to us about when we go to be at the Jordans, just make sure, not to get hyper around. But when we're there, we feel like we're hyper everywhere. It's just like we're going to our parents. So I just wanted to take time to acknowledge that, and I speak many of our Pacific Islanders all over mission. Thank you. Thank you for believing in us and hold us so dear to your heart, you and Peter and your entire families. The day that you and Peter stood up in my wedding, my parents didn't come, you took that role, and I was honored. Maria and I were honored that you took that role as my parents that's 30 years ago. And so I simply wanted to say, we love you. I love you very much. Thank you so much, Donna. And looking forward to more of these blessings.
Thank you, Father. I love it. And I think, yeah, I just, you have taught me so much. You have taught me so much what it is to be family, what it is to have joy. Yeah, you've taught me a lot, Muvai. I'm so proud of you and Marie. And I've said this before and I say it again, very proud of you that you've persevered and didn't give up and didn't fall for some of our gods. Bless you, Muvai. Love you very much. Love to the family.
Thank you. Thank you, Mua. It's marvelous. And thank you, Billy, for introducing the youngest YWAMer there. I see in your arms. Good, good. Russ and Sandy. Thank you, guys. You know, Sandy, I don't know if but you know, my pull into YWAM initially was because of my love of dance, and of course there was so much happening in YWAM Cambridge as YWAM's Academy of Performing Arts. But we just really look forward to hearing a little bit about what's going on with the dance barn, and Russ, with your music, and with the art center that you guys have. And I just I want to open this time up for Russ and Sandy to just to share what's on their heart.
So we're actually in different places right now. And we kind of agreed that I'd start and Russ would fill in gaps. We spent many years in camping ministry and were called away from it into YWAM in 92 and headed off and did a Crossroads, and then did a DTS, a Crossroads DTS, and then did a School of Worship. And the Lord definitively called us back to Canada, and we then landed back in Canada and ended up doing a cross Canada mission for 5 years, expressing the arts at street level in an evangelistic mission. Took a mobile theater in the form of 4 semi-trailers and went town to town for 5 years. Our youngest daughter was actually born on the road. Russ would say literally on the center line of Highway 1. And when we returned from that 5-year mission, there was a real sense that God was imparting to us that we needed to really start to invest in artists. And, you know, we had done a lot and actually proceeded to do a lot following that 5-year mission, you know, probably for the next 15 years or so, still doing arts as mission. But there was a distinctive shift as we were in the midst of that the Lord seemed to be calling us to not just do arts as mission, but to minister to artists in the community, and to really begin to facilitate the arts well beyond what we would do normally as mission. And I mean, the whole idea of spheres and being right in that territory, we felt that needed to happen. So I started by developing, well, I didn't intentionally do it. I literally started a dance class in our living room for our kids and their friends. And within a year and a half, it turned into 11 dance classes in our living room. And I was suddenly running a dance studio. And we had been doing that for about, how many years, Russ? I guess about 15 years, we had been running that dance studio. We eventually moved it into the barn on our property and created 2 dance studios there. But in 2016, after moving into a second dance studio, we suddenly had to move spaces. And Russ and I kind of looked at each other and said, do we want to just run another dance studio, or is there more? And we felt very strongly put upon our hearts that it was time to develop a arts venue, and that it would be a space where there would be performances and arts classes, mentorship for artists in the areas of music and dance and film and acting, and that we would start to do that from this center. And so in 2017, we moved into a space that we now call Bez Arts Hub. So everything that we're doing is actually no longer Dance Barn, is all technically under Bez. And Bez Arts Hub now has a black box theater, which is a live performance space, studios for dance classes. And what is happening here is for the community of this region. We bring in Juno Award-winning artists for concerts, people like Sherry Ulrich and Lila Bialy and Barney Bental and Jim Burns. And we've got kind of top-notch artists coming and doing their music here. And then we have community dance studio for all ages. And then a mentorship program where we kind of walk with artists through their personal journeys, through their creative journeys, and then whatever they do with it beyond that. And I'll just pause there. Russ, do you want to add anything to that part of the picture?
Yeah, I think so. Hi, everybody. Boy, it's good to see all your faces, and it's really good to be here. Thanks so much for inviting us. I think that there was a point before we moved into Bez, and it was probably, almost 8 years before that, when we were sitting in church. It was actually with Gideon Chu was preaching up at the front. I remember we were at the Church of Zion, and maybe David Damien was repenting on behalf of somebody. I'm not sure what was happening. I don't remember, but I remember God spoke to me and he said, "My kingdom's a real kingdom." I went, okay, good. Got it. That's a good idea. No, you don't understand. My kingdom's a real kingdom. Okay, good. Yes, I believe you, God. Your kingdom is real. And then a third time, like a good scriptural, endorsement was, he said it again, my kingdom's a real kingdom. And so I took the next several years trying to unpack that and understand what that meant. And all of a sudden I found myself doing music with my band or whatever in a place that wasn't initiated by a church mission. All of a sudden I'm doing music in a just doing music, and people are responding. They're all my same gospel songs, but it wasn't a sort of a mission trip that I was on. I was just singing and stuff was happening. And throughout that, we're starting to get, okay, so when we're talking about spheres of influence, well, is it that we're coming from the church to go and influence, or is it that we're just being us in doing our thing, and what is that like? So I think that was how God got my attention, to say he's actually at work in the whole world. He's actually on his throne, wooing and calling everybody to himself. Don't always see it as we've got to do things, down this one path. That is, you're in the church and you're doing a mission trip with YWAM, and it's all this, and it's got these goals. God is actually really likes the whole planet. He likes everybody here, and he's actually actively calling people, get out there and find out what he's up to. And that sort of was an interesting shift from my thinking, having done music in the church. And that helped us in shaping where we got to in 2017 with setting up an arts center for the community, not a Christian arts center, but just arts, just being us as Christians, Jesus followers in the midst of the arts. And that's where we landed in setting this place up.
Yeah, well, and actually, one of the things that really sunk deep into our spirits was that every year with the Santa Claus Parade and the Canada Day Parade in Vancouver. We had just 1 year, actually it was the year of the Olympics. And Russ had somehow convinced the organizers of the parade that we could have this whole entourage of artists and dancers and musicians at the end of the parade that would make this huge celebration. And so they put us at the end of the parade. I mean, we ended up having a few musicians and 10 dancers or something. But it created such a sense of celebration that they kept inviting us back. And so here we were, tens of thousands of people celebrating on the streets of Vancouver to the songs that were gospel songs without even knowing it, getting caught up in the celebration. And that has been our sense, is that the Spirit of God just wants people to get caught up in the celebration of who He is, but also acknowledging that that life is not always that fun and that celebration, but that life just happens. And so that's kind of a big part of what we have been focused on with this community here. We've really, it's interesting to me, John, that you mentioned Cambridge. I actually grew up in Cambridge, not knowing that YWAM base was there. I saw that building, would drive past it, had no idea I was, doing all of that. But to me, it feels like a connection of impartation and kind of the next phase of kind of what God has been wanting. And I think that the great challenge for us, and when I started the mentorship program, which has been going on for about 16 years, initially we just were raising up dancers. A big part of what I felt was important to do is that that art not just be for the sake of telling a gospel message, but that art would be a means by which we can express kind of the nature of human life. Actually, I've got a quote here by Leo Tolstoy, and he says, "Art is not a pleasure, a solace, or an amusement. Art is a great matter. It is an organ of human life, transmitting man's reasonable perception into feeling." And one of the things that I started to do with our mentorship students is that rather than try to, do things in churches or as evangelistic type things, that we would launch dance productions on city stages, and that we would talk about everything from addiction to cancer to relationship to, whatever the dancers felt that they had on their heart to share. And so we would get some response from some people saying, "Oh, that's quite dark," or "It's, you should have hope at the end," or different things. But we have felt very much that the nature of what we need to restore to understanding art is that it is that whole, transmitting man's reasonable perception into feeling, that we begin to step away from art as, I hate to say it this way, but art as propaganda, and begin to understand art as a function of the creator and his creativity. And I've got another quote here by Brian Zand. He said, "Art at its best is an attempt to recapture the wonder that vanished, the wonder vanished with our lost innocence in Eden." And feeling very much that a big part of what our focus is right now is to begin to restore the connection to our humanity, our connection to one another as humanity, so that, the kingdom is ushered in not just by gospel message, but I say that with a condition. I'd say what we would think the gospel message is, which is Jesus died on the cross, blah, 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 blah. But go back to what Jesus actually said to John's disciples when they said, you know, are you the Messiah? And he said, well, tell John this, the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame are walking. And I feel like one of the crucial things that is happening here in the midst of our arts is actually that healing is happening. That when we're walking with our mentorship students, they are walking through personal journey that they are expressing through the arts, but also receiving healing through the arts. And people, you know, the blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing, those who've been walking in life with a limp are being healed. And we're even seeing that as well in our evening classes. We're beginning to focus a lot in movement classes that are connected to wellness. I have a class called Dancing for Healing, and we spend time permitting people to use movement as an expression for deep pain and wounds and those kinds of things. I mean, we know this from a lot of the research that is now being done in science connected to the fact that a lot of our wounds and trauma is actually being held in our bodies, and that a lot of healing can then come by restoring movement. And beginning to, I've had a number of people in my class who are receiving deep healing by being able to just move in ways that express things that they've never been able to express with their words. And so we're seeing healing happen. And a lot of these things that we're starting to step into, even seeing healing through music, restoration of people through music and those kinds of things. So a lot of these things are brand new territory for us. But we, you know, that whole word about this being a real kingdom, that the arts aren't just something that, you know, probably the most offensive thing that we constantly hear, oh, those artsy fartsies, oh, they should get a real job, those kinds of things. And we're really trying to establish here an arts world in which these artists can make a living. It's why we've provided a performance space so that they can do their art and get paid for it. Dance instructors who can come and teach and get paid for it, so that then they can pursue other creative things that they can do with their art. Russ, do you have other thoughts in that?
Well, I was thinking about the Sherry Elrick concert that happened, and she's a Canadian entertainer, songwriter, been around forever. And I remember hearing her on the radio, and she's become a friend. And she had a concert, and who were the YWAM folks that came to that concert? Our dear friends, David, I've just forgot, they used to run the university.
David Boyd.
Dave and Carol Boyd, they were there, and it was in a great moment. And Sherry shared her journey with the breakup of her marriage and some of the forgiveness that she had to go through, and forgiving herself and others, and all of that. And Carol Boyd said afterwards, well, that was one of the deepest worship times I've had in a long time. And I'm like, this is not a Christian person singing on stage, but she's a human processing her emotions and her grief over broken relationship in a very vulnerable and open way. And we're experiencing God because we're connected. We know the Father, and we know his love to see his kids healed. And so we're experiencing that and we have language for it. And it was just, it was powerful. We've had so many of those moments in this sort of community shared arts experience. Yeah, that's what I thought I would bring in as a story.
Well, and I think that's probably our most important discovery is that, you know, if the kingdom is a real kingdom, even those who don't know that they know the Father yet actually are expressing his heart. And this is a quote from J.F. Martel. He says, the artist always and for all times, the artist is always and for all times a seer. And artistic creation is always and for all time an act of prophecy. The artist does not choose the prophecy, rather the prophetic shines through her work. And I really believe that what we are touching on, fascinating that Barney Bentall, he has come a number of times into our space. He's actually the son of a Baptist pastor who used to pay for Russ and I to go off to pastors' conferences back in the day. And Barney Bentall has written this song called "The Preacher." You should all listen to it. And Barney had walked away from the church many, many moons ago. I would say he wouldn't say he was a Christian, but boy, does the prophetic word that had been deposited in his life back in the day come through his music. And he has the song "The Preacher" is actually the Beatitudes written in this whole other form. And I really believe that what we're seeing is all of these artists who don't necessarily attest to God, but they're listening to the Spirit of God, because that's really where creativity comes from. It comes still from the Spirit of God, whether or not they actually attest to knowing Jesus or not. Spirit of God gives it without finding fault, you know? And we're finding these incredible artists in our space who would not say that they're Christians, and yet the Spirit of God, like Carol Boyd says, is speaking through. And Russ and I sit there and smile through many of the concerts that we have here, and we feel so full of the presence of the Spirit in the space, because the artists are being true to what they're hearing from the Spirit of God. And that, I think, is probably a important new framework for us to understand, is when we're in the spheres that we're in, that the trickle of the Spirit is coming through those spheres, through people who may not even know that it's God speaking through them. That's probably where we can stop, or unless you have something else, Russ. But
no, I think that's good. I would love to hear from others. I don't know if that's what you have on the schedule there, John and Graham, but yeah, I mean, for us, it's such an interesting thing at our life. I mean, obviously, I spent my whole early life as a songwriter for the church. And I wrote, albums upon albums and musicals and things, not musicals, but the soundtrack for the March for Jesus, for goodness sake. We were doing all this stuff, and this is just so different to say, can God speak to us without us having all the right language, all the Christian language? Can God still be present? And I tell you, every artist that shows up that aren't Jesus followers, we always hear from God through what he's doing through the creative stuff. And it's always special. And I'm just really feel honored that the Lord has allowed us this window into, into a world that, yeah, anyways, I don't even know how to express it, but I feel very thankful about that.
Good. Thank you, Russ and Sandy. Let's do that. Are there any kind of questions or feedback or comments or whatever that anybody has? Open it up.
I would like to share a testimony, if I can. Russ and Sandy, it's been so great to connect with you guys more of late, and especially through our daughter Tessa. And I don't know if you guys know, but in 2020, I had a brain tumor. I was getting really sick and weak and tired a lot, didn't know why. And after many months I was diagnosed with it was benign brain tumor. But Tessa was there at the time with us. It was in the middle of the pandemic. And our other children were in various other parts of the world. But Tessa was there. She was, was she 18? And she found this very, very traumatic, very difficult to deal with. So when she started to take the dance mentorship program with Sandy and with Russ, this was the big theme that she did with her dance. And she danced through that trauma with Sandy's help. You know, there was the dance, developing the dance, but there was the one-on-ones, there was a lot going on. And it was just brought so much healing. And to us too, to watch her. Yeah, the end of the story was I had surgery, the tumor removed, and I'm great. I should tell you, everything turned out really well. Yeah, praise God, had everything restored. So, but Tessa danced through this trauma of having her mom, like I can't lose my mom. And to watch her dance, it's actually, I think part of it's on YouTube. But just what Sandy said, I mean, we witnessed this in our own family, and to see the healing that Tess experienced, and she's since gone on to do a DTS, and she's gone back. She's in the second year of the dance mentorship. She has a real heart for dance and the arts and ministry, and we're learning so much through the arts through Tessa. So I just want to say, I just want to share the testimony, just how amazing it has been for our family. And thanks, Russ and Sandy.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi.
We just wanted to say how much we enjoy. Well, I always like seeing you guys. Russ, I really had fun in Montana when we seen you, and you brought your guitar down by the lake and hung out. Like, it was so much fun. But last year, or a couple of years ago, 2 years now, when everything shut down and you did the Good Friday story and stuff, we couldn't go anywhere, and so we got to hang out in our living room with you. And I can't remember what's the other guy's name that was on there?
Justin Reese.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the best Good Friday ever. Normally we go to a really long, nicely put together service, but it was so much fun to have you in our living room and feel like we were hanging out with you and take communion. We had some boxed wine and bannock. It was pretty great. So
Awesome.
yeah, it was awesome. So thank you for going out of your way to do that, even though things were shut down for you guys too. It was fun to hang out with you in our living room, even though we couldn't hang out with you in person.
Thanks. It's great.
Well, I love meeting with Sandy every week. We meet for prayer every Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, that's been a real treat.
Yeah, we get together for prayer for associates ministry and whatever else God puts on our heart.
Yeah,
So I love that.
Yeah, that's been wonderful.
Mute. You're muted, John.
Thank you, Russ. A couple of people who would pray for Russ and Sandy and the Bez Arts Hub and the invitation to artists and the mentoring of artists, the speaking into the lives of artists. A couple of people just go ahead and pray out.
Father, I thank you for what you're doing in the lives of Sandy and Russ. And Lord, also the revelation that you have given them, that in the kingdom, there's no secular or sacred, and everything that we do is sacred to you, because the kingdom is a real kingdom. And that is such a beautiful word that you would have given Russ. And so, Lord, thank you that they're walking that out, and that they are salt and light in the area that you've placed them in. And so, Lord, we bless them today. And we ask, Father, for more open doors. We ask, Lord, that the treasures in hidden places that they have not yet discovered, that you would reveal that to them as they remain faithful in the call that you have given them, that, Lord, the more that you have for them will be revealed as they dig deeper in you. So we bless them today in Jesus' name.
Father, I thank you for just this calling that you've given to Russ and Sandy to walk between different worlds, to be in between the sphere of the church and the sphere of the arts, and to somehow translate for all of us into words things that we can then experience of you because of that. I thank you for the ways that they have wrestled with how to explain this and how to talk about it, and how to put the experiences that they've had into things that other people can see, and can see you really and truly reflected in new ways that they haven't before. People who come from all different kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of gifting, Father. And I pray that you would just continue to bless that you would continue to help them to put new and fresh words onto things that have been true for thousands of years, that you would help them to find new expressions and help others to find the expression of the things that you have put within them, the expressions of the gifts and the glory. And I thank you that they just continue to make space for that. And Lord, I pray that you would continue to lead them and guide them. And I thank you for their obedience to things that seem outrageous and not the normal path. I thank you for their continued willingness to walk that path. And Lord, I pray that that there would just be more of that to come for them. Not like more difficulties, but more things that are good things that you are going to bring about for your kingdom through them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yes, Bobby.
This is not a prayer. I just was thinking of you guys that like from a church mindset, like people might think, I think I get it. It's like stealth, this is kind of like stealth missions or something like that. And I'm thinking, no, it's not stealth missions. It's the kingdom of God. Like, this is what the farmer does. He plants seeds, and I just, it makes me want to cry. Bless you guys.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Thank you.
Well
Thank
said,
you.
Bobby. Thank you. Thank you for to connect more with Russ and Sandy and what they're doing. I know they send out periodic kind of newsletters if you want to get on that. Russ, what's the best way for someone to get on that mailing list, email list?
Yeah, there's two different mailing lists. There's the Russ and Sandy Arts and Life mailing list. You can message me and I can put you on that. And then there's the Bez Arts Hub mailing list for all the events and things we're doing at Bez Arts Hub. And that link is on bezartshub.com, and there's a sign up spot there. Yeah, and otherwise we're on Instagram at Bez Arts Hub, and Bez Dance is another Instagram handle we have, and then we have Bez Mentorship. Those three handles on Instagram as well as Facebook.
Good. And I think Sandy's put it down in the chat there, one of the contacts anyway, or several of them. So that's great. And I know Sandy has written 2 or 3 books. Sandy, how many? 2 books. Great. And Russ has at least 5 albums more?
12.
12.
See, so I'm right, more than 5.
I'm old.
Yeah, more than 5. So yeah, so I mean, if to get a heart of, to participate in what they're doing, there's those vehicles as well, and connect with them that way. Donna, I know has so there's you made a reference to Peter's book Reentry. Are there other books that you've written, Donna? I think you're muted still.
He wrote The Last Thing I'll Ever Do.
Okay.
And we also have the YWAM Associates website that we'd love anybody to come on, www.ywamassociates.com. And Patricia, do you have anything else you want to share about that? She does the communication.
No, I think you covered it. You covered it all.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Such a rich time there. Oh, Graham, you have something?
Yeah, just before we wrap there, John, just a quick update for next month is Jennifer's husband, Mike Davies, who is really doing a lot of stuff with business as missions. He works with Russ and Sandy in the Lower Mainland with that whole area. He's going to be on, and they'll have just finished their business as missions conference, and he'll be talking more about business as missions, from that perspective as well too. So just sort of like a little bit of a flow on, a tag team thing from this month. So that as well. But Donna, I just wanted to say, and I don't know if you know this story, but Peter was probably one of the first YWAMers I met in Australia, representing Lauren at a funeral that he'd flown out for. And it was partially through that funeral service that I am in YWAM today.
Wow. Yeah. Peter did that a lot, representing Lauren.
Sorry, good to know. Look around when I'm focused.
Marvelous. Good. I hope everybody is registered for the
Yeah, I was just
YWAM
gonna
Leaders
say that.
Gathering. Woohoo. Okay, put the word out. So again, the dates are June 13th to the 17th. So look forward to seeing as many people that can make it there. We'll have, as Graham mentioned, we'll have our last gathering before our summer break. Will be the first Tuesday in June. And Graham, again, thank you for keeping us all connected through your communication and the links and so forth. So Graham will be sending that reminder out as we get closer to the end of May, beginning of June. Invite others or remind others or open the door for others to come in and connect with us. And is there anything else, Graham or Paul, before we conclude?
I was just going to say, I will send the link out to this video, but I'll also include some of those links that Russ and Sandy have put in there as well too. And I see Jennifer's posted up the BAM Vancouver 2022 eventbrite.ca thing as well. So I'll put those links in the email that goes out hopefully within an hour or two.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Again, thank you, Donna, Russ, Sandy, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Blessings. Graham and Paul, if you guys can stay on.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great seeing you, Russ.